Notre Dame has had one of the best defenses in college football the past 2 seasons, but what are the biggest holes the Irish need to fill to keep it that way? Coming up, we'll break down Notre Dame's biggest needs on defense in the class of 2026.
You are Locked On Irish, your daily podcast on the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome into another edition of Locked On Irish, your daily Notre Dame podcast. My name is Wojciak and I'm the host. I graduated from Notre Dame in 2018 and now I'm a producer at Fox Sports, and I'm thrilled to have you here on Tuesday, March 4th, and thanks for making this your first listen of the day. Before we get rolling, please remember to subscribe on YouTube or your preferred podcast platform, and let's talk some recruiting. It's that time of year, and recruiting has really been heating up across the country. So today, I'm going to break down the biggest positional needs on defense in the class of 2026. I did the same exercise for the offense last Wednesday, so if you missed that episode, be sure to check that out once you're done here. But like the offense, I looked at 3 key factors when I ranked these positions. Number 1, who Notre Dame signed in last year's cycle, who they have currently committed in the class of 2026, and how the roster is built heading into the future. And let's start with the top priority on defense, and in my opinion, the 2 most important positions in this entire class. Defensive tackle at 1 and defensive end at number 2. So the reason I have defensive tackle ranked at number 1 is because there's a lack of proven depth behind the current rotation. They brought in Jared Dawson, the transfer from Louisville. They have Gabriel Rubio. They have Donovan Heinisch, 2 guys who have contributed to Notre Dame. But then behind them, there isn't a lot of proven commodities. And let's just be honest here. Notre Dame has missed on several top-tier defensive tackles in recent cycles, and now they're trying to make up for those misses in the transfer portal. And I think Notre Dame learned a valuable lesson this most recent cycle, and that's there's not a ton of great defensive line talent in the transfer portal. Maybe some years you get lucky and you could snag a great player on the interior, but it's pretty difficult, right? Like Notre Dame got RJ open last year. He was on the edge. He was a pretty underwhelming player for most of the year until he came up with one of the biggest plays of the season against Georgia. The year before that, they struck gold with Javonte Jean-Baptiste. Again, edge rusher. It's harder to find defensive tackles in the middle in the transfer portal, at least good ones that can come in and start right away and be really good players, or at least at the level that Notre Dame expects from their defensive line. And if you look across college football, really, you look across any level of football, NFL, college, high school, the best teams always have a great defensive line. And it starts on the interior. And Notre Dame has not been recruiting well enough at this position in recent years. Let's go back to 2025. They signed Davian Dixon, Joseph Rafe, and Gordy Solfstad. Joseph Rafe is the highest ranked one of those on the 24/7 Sports Composite, and I know not everyone wants to hear about the rankings, but it's pretty alarming when he is the number 53 defensive tackle in the entire class. None of these guys, Dixon, Rafe, or Solfstad, were ranked in the top 450 in the class last year. They missed on some top targets, and that's who they had to settle with. These guys might end up being good. They might end up playing better than their ranking suggests, but that's really concerning when you think back to 2024 when the only 2 guys Notre Dame signed at D tackle were Cole Mullins and Sean Civillano Jr. I think Sean Civillano Jr. could contribute this season potentially. Still think he has ways to go with his conditioning and all that. Cole Mullins is a bright future too, but they are not elite prospects. They're not guys who are going to come in right away and compete for playing time. They also missed on Justin Scott very publicly in that cycle. He was the Chicago product. Notre Dame went all in on him. Then he committed to Ohio State, and then he flipped to Miami. And I understand that Justin Scott's case is pretty typical of defensive tackles, where they go where the most money is, and sometimes it's not always easy to find a great cultural fit for Notre Dame at defensive tackle. But frankly, those are just excuses. They have to weigh to get some results here on the defensive line and specifically on the interior. You go back to 2023, it's not much better. Armel Mukam, Devin Houston, Brendan Vernon. Armel Mukam might be a part of the rotation this year. I do not expect Devin Houston or Brendan Vernon to be impact players at all. So you look at the past 3 cycles, 2025, 2024, and 2023, there's just not much to show for. So far, the only one who has done anything to any extent is Armel Mukum, and that's just come in as a rotational player. Now, that could change this year, maybe has more of an impact, but it's time for Notre Dame to start developing guys in-house. I understand there wasn't a ton of opportunities for playing time with Riley Mills and Howard Cross leading the way for the past 2 seasons, but Notre Dame has to make a change. They have to start recruiting better at defensive tackle, and it starts this cycle. Right now, they don't have anyone currently committed at the position, but they have a couple guys that they're really going after. Number 1, Elijah Golden. This would be huge for the class. Arguably the biggest commitment in the entire class if they were able to land Elijah Golden. He's the number 40 ranked player overall, the number 1 defensive tackle, according to the 24/7 Sports Composite. He's at Cardinal Mooney in Florida, transferred actually from IMG Academy before last season. It was a bit of a surprise, but Notre Dame is going after him aggressively. He is going to visit Notre Dame at the end of June, and this is the type of player that could just change the perception around the entire program. I don't normally say that about recruits, but considering the struggles that Notre Dame has had at this position and just how good of a player Golden is and the fact that he comes from SEC country, that would be massive, absolutely massive. So they got to land him. They missed out on Samote Ketuanga. He committed to USC on February 23rd. Notre Dame felt like they were the leader for him. Now, he could play on the outside, but he could also play on the inside as well of the defensive line. And Notre Dame felt like they got him. They didn't. He stayed home. He is committed to USC. Notre Dame is going to continue recruiting him, but it's not looking great for the Irish. They're also looking at 3-star Tiki Ola, visited in January. So there's guys out there, if they're able to land Golden and if they're able to land Tiki, that'd be really good because I think they're looking at taking 4 defensive linemen in this class, but it really needs to improve at defensive tackle. But they also need to land some high-end defensive ends as well, and that's why I have that at number 2. You could make the case that defensive end is the second most important position on the field behind the quarterback. And the reason why is because there's one position that could disrupt the quarterback in the opponent's passing game more than anyone else, and that is a defensive end. If you have a dominant, like a truly dominant edge rusher, it just wreaks havoc for the offense all game long. And Notre Dame has had some good defensive ends. I like some of the young guys they have on the roster right now, but they haven't had a true game wrecker in years. And we saw in 2018 when they had Julian Okwara and Khalid Kareem, like just how good that defense was, and they were led by those 2 guys on the edge. And that's a big reason why they finished that regular season undefeated and went to the college football playoff. Then they played a Clemson team who had an even better defensive line, and Notre Dame could not do anything against that defense all game long because Clemson had one of the best they had the best defensive line in college football that year, and arguably one of the best defensive lines in recent college football history. So that was a great test case for why you need dominant edge rushers, and I think Notre Dame has recruited better on the edge as opposed to the interior in recent years. Like I liked who they got last year, 4-star Christopher Burgess out of Chicago. He was the number 70 player overall, number 8 edge rusher. Dominic Kulak is a sort of a developmental guy, but I think he has a bright future. They do not have anyone currently committed in the class of 2026, but they also had Bryce Young in 2024. He looks like he could be a superstar at Notre Dame. I've already said I think he could be the best defensive end to come through Notre Dame since Stephon Tuitt. We're going to start to see this year if he can make that leap. So they have recruited better at defensive end, and that's why I have it behind defensive tackle, but they still need to rack up elite talent on the board because Jordan Botelho is going to be gone after this season. Boubacar Traore might only have 1 to 2 years left at Notre Dame. And then behind them, you've got some young guys like a Logan Thomas, who I think will be good, but you need more of those elite guys to compete at the college football playoff and compete to win national championships. Like Notre Dame had a good defensive line last year. It was not great, but they could be great if they recruit a little bit better. A couple guys to keep an eye out for, some top targets on the board. 4-star Rodney Durham, one of the best players in the entire country, is expected to visit sometime this month. Number 59 player overall in the class. Really, really good player. Looks like he's leaning towards South Carolina or Tennessee, but maybe Notre Dame can come in and make a big jump when he visits campus later this month. A couple other 4-stars. Mikhail Blade, another Simeon kid, played high school with Christopher Burgess Jr., visited twice last year. Next visit is not currently scheduled, but Notre Dame expects him to come back to campus. They just found out that Xavion Griffin-Haynes, another edge rusher, 4-star, is going to visit on April 11th. And then they're in the mix for a couple 3-stars. Ebenezer Iwatade, he's going to visit June 20th, and Dre Quinn. These are guys that Notre Dame is higher on, especially Ebenezer. They think that he is going to skyrocket up the recruiting rankings during this last year. So they're trying to get him early, trying to get him to commit before all those teams in the SEC realize just how good he is, and they try to swoop in late. Overall, Notre Dame has really improved at this position in recent years. I think with Bryce Young and Logan Thomas and Christopher Burgess Jr., all three of those guys could be game wreckers on the edge. And you also have your veterans like Joshua Burnham, who's been really steady. They are in a good place at defensive end, but when you consider the importance of the position and the fact that Notre Dame hasn't had elite players at the position in years, I have it at number 2 on the biggest needs in the class of 2026. All right, coming up next, we're going to break down why safety is such a key need in the class of 2026. Plus, we'll take a look at the linebacker position and now Marcus Freeman plans to keep that unit strong under a new defensive coordinator. Today's episode is brought to you by Supply House. Get the supplies you need from the site made for the skilled trades. Supply House. Whether you're in plumbing, HVAC, or electrical work, Supply House is the reliable way to order products online. Their easy-to-use website is packed with helpful resources and the latest product info to help you get the job done right. Plus, with a complete inventory of over 200,000 parts from 400-plus top brands, you'll find exactly what you need delivered fast from coast to coast. Need help with an order? Supply House offers expert support and industry-leading service, so you'll always talk to a real person. And for trade pros looking for an extra edge, their free Trade Master program offers exclusive perks like a dedicated phone line, free shipping, and discounts on every order. Thousands of skilled professionals are already taking advantage. Now it's your turn. Join the Trade Master program today at supplyhouse.com/TM and start ordering plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies with just a few clicks. Plus, use promo code SH5 for 5% off your first order. That's supplyhouse.com. All right, coming in at number 3, I've got safeties, okay? And the reason being is I have concerns about the depth at the position. Xavier Watts is out the door, 2-time All-American, amazing player. And now they have Adon Schuler, who I think is going to be a terrific player for Notre Dame this year. But I think he's so good that he could be out after this season. He redshirted his first year. He started every game last season. And if he plays to his full potential this season, I think he could be a high draft pick in the NFL draft because he has all the traits, all the measurables, and I just think he is that good of a player. Just think about the jump that Adon Schuler made from his freshman year to his sophomore year. If he makes a similar jump going into his third year with the program, he's going to make some serious waves in college football, and I think that could be enough for him to leave early. We'll see if that happens, but it's something to monitor because behind him, Notre Dame has 0 proven guys. And I understand that happens, but look at the depth behind Adon Schuler, okay? So they went out in the transfer portal. They got Jalen Stroman. Big reason why is because behind Schuler, you only have Luke Talich, Ben Minnick, and then a couple other unknowns in Tabron Benny-Powell, Tay Johnson, Kennedy Urlacher. They missed on Ivan Taylor. They missed on Peyton Bowen a couple of cycles ago, and those were 2 very high-end safety prospects. So I think that there's interesting pieces in that room. Kennedy Urlacher is obviously very intriguing, given his family history, given what he showed in spurts last season. But still, when you have guys like Kyle Hamilton come through, and now an Xavier Watts, potentially Adon Schuler, that is the standard for the safety position at Notre Dame. That is what we have come to expect because Notre Dame has produced so many good players at that position. So now you're looking in this room and you're looking at Luke Talich and you're thinking, very good player, very nice player. Maybe he develops and now he's able to be a reliable starter. But is he going to be, on All-American watch list? Probably not. Tabron Benny-Powell? Probably not. Maybe Tay Johnson. I know the staff is really high on him. He missed some time last season with an injury. He also could be more of a cornerback anyway, but he's a very versatile player. Notre Dame needs a true stud at that position, and they have not been able to land a ton of those in recent cycles, but personally, I am very high on Jadon Blair and what he can contribute. Even though they missed on Taylor, fortunately, that loss was not quite as impactful or just didn't sting quite as much because they got a guy like Jane Blair who physically is like a pterodactyl. He's the closest thing to Kyle Hamilton in terms of size, length, and speed. I don't think he has the natural football instincts or just the overall playmaking ability of a Kyle Hamilton, but Jadon Blair is really, really good. He's an early enrollee already on campus. I think that he could play his freshman season. Maybe not at safety, but could make an impact on special teams. They also signed Brandon Logan. Very interesting player because he was committed to Vanderbilt. He's an elite baseball player, and it looked like he was going to play college baseball and put all of his focus on that. Then Notre Dame football came in and offered Logan after Ivan Taylor flipped his commitment to Michigan before he ultimately ended up at Alabama. And then Logan decided to decommit from Vanderbilt, come to Notre Dame to play football, and baseball. He is an elite athlete. I could see him as being one of those guys who just ends up being a really good football player, even though he flew under the radar as a recruit. But it's probably going to take some time for him to physically mature enough to play safety at the college level. They also signed Ethan Long out of Connecticut, number 44 player in the country. The staff really likes him. The staff has really been prioritizing Connecticut in recruiting lately, and Ethan Long could be another good player for the Irish, but I think he's a few years away as well. They don't have anyone currently committed in the class of 2026, but they are after some big-time players, including Joey O'Brien. Now, Joey O'Brien could be a cornerback. He's listed at 6'3". He might even be 6'4", but he's so good. You just sign him and you figure out his position later because he could play safety, could play nickel, could play cornerback. He's a number 50 player overall in the class, number 7 at his listed position, which is cornerback, but it doesn't really matter. He is so good, and this would be a big time get for Notre Dame if they were able to land Joey O'Brien, because even though he's number 50 right now, he could continue to climb up the rankings with a good senior year. Physically, he has everything you would want, and that is why Notre Dame is going after him so hard. I just think that if they were able to get him, that would just be a huge addition for the entire defense. But it's not just Joey O'Brien. They're also after 4-star Caden Gebhardt, 3-star Nick Reddish, and 4-star Blaine Bradford, another name to keep an eye out on. So now with Mike Mickens in control of the safeties and the corners, I feel like we're going to see a bit of an uptick at safety recruiting, because for as good as Chris O'Leary was as developing, he was not quite as good at recruiting, but we've already seen what Mike Mickens can do on the recruiting trail. So I think that Notre Dame is in good position here to land a couple top prospects at safety, but that is why I have it at number 3. At number 4, I've got the linebackers. Notre Dame has recruited pretty well at linebacker in recent years. They landed 2 big-time studs back-to-back years, Kingston Viliamu-Asa 2 cycles ago, and then Madden Framo at the buzzer in this most recent cycle. Those were the 2 top linebackers in the class in back-to-back years, and they are going to be great players at Notre Dame. We already saw glimpses of what KVA could be last season. I think Madden Framo could be just as good as KVA in his freshman season, and maybe beyond that as well. They also have Drake Bowen, who's still pretty young, and Jaden Osbury, who are guys who are ready to take that next big step. Like Drake Bowen was a really good linebacker last year, certainly exceeded my expectations, but now going next season, I look at him as a potential captain and like the next in line for Notre Dame at the Mike linebacker spot. Jaden Osbury is a little bit different because he's been moving around. I think he needs to find a home positionally because he's a rover, but the rover comes off the field a lot when Notre Dame is in nickel. That's basically become their base. So he needs to figure out the will linebacker, how he fits into the equation there. But when he's out there, he's usually making plays. So Notre Dame has a bunch of young linebackers. That's good. They also took some developmental guys who could emerge in time, like Bodie Cajon and Teddy Rizak a couple years ago. But I liked what they brought in last year in addition to Framo. It wasn't just him. Anthony Saka out of Pennsylvania, really good player. I think he was a bit underrated, honestly. He was the number 233 player overall in the 24/7 Sports Composite. To me, he's a top 150 type of player. And then Ko'o Kia, who's the number 59 linebacker in the class, but I think the reason there is because he's in Hawaii and teams just aren't paying as much attention to players in Hawaii, but I think he is really good. So you look at Framo, Saka, Kia, like those are 3 guys who could contribute at Notre Dame here in short order. They also have Thomas Davis Jr. already committed in the class, a top 10 linebacker in the country, and he's also the leader of this recruiting class. When you hear about other recruits who are considering Notre Dame, the one thing they bring up more often than not is the fact that Thomas Davis Jr. is in their ear all the time about Notre Dame, hyping it up. Davis Jr.'s dad, Thomas Davis Sr., played in the NFL for a few years, so Notre Dame is continuing that trend of getting the sons of former NFL players. And I think that Thomas Davis Jr. as the leader of this class is a really solid next in line after getting a KVA and after getting a Madden Framo. So they've been really good at linebacker in recent years. I expect that to continue as these guys continue to develop. They're also after a couple interesting prospects like Tank King. He's a 3-star, but I think he is going to rise up the rankings. Jacoby Clapper, 3-star out of St. Xavier in Cincinnati, Ohio. Let's go Bombers. And a couple other guys like Simeon Caldwell. He might be a safety, but he's one of those guys, again, like when I was talking about Joey O'Brien earlier, just get him to commit, figure out his position later, because it doesn't matter if he's playing at safety or if he's playing at linebacker. This dude is a stud. Top 100 player in the country, number 5 in his class at the position. They have him listed as a linebacker on the 24/7 Sports Composite. But again, if they're able to get King, if they're able to get Clapper, and they're able to get Caldwell, then they could be in great shape to go along with Thomas Davis Jr. So I got it at 4. I have no real concerns about the linebacker position going forward. I think Max Bull is a very underrated assistant coach, and he has got that room in great shape. Mike Mickens has also done a phenomenal job at Notre Dame, especially when it comes to transforming Notre Dame's cornerback room into a real strength. But you can never have too many elite cover guys. So coming up next, we're going to look at how the Irish can keep stacking talent at cornerback, and then we'll wrap up our breakdown of the biggest needs in the class of 2026. So one position had to be last, and that position is cornerbacks. It's ranked number 5, even though they only have one commitment in the class of 2026. And honestly, I think Chasten Smith is probably going to decommit. That's kind of been the rumor going around really ever since Chad Bowden left Notre Dame to join USC as their general manager. By the way, did you see the comments he made recently where he's saying that Lincoln Riley is the best recruiting head coach he's ever been around? If that's the case, why has recruiting sucked there for the past couple years? Anyway, that's not the point here. The point is that Notre Dame has done so well at cornerback under Mike Mickens, and I expect that to continue for as long as he's there. They have one of the best cornerbacks in the entire country in Leonard Moore, and he's only going to be a sophomore, but let me just tell you right now, he's only got 2 more years left at Notre Dame because he's going to be a very high draft pick. But it doesn't even really matter because last year's class was absolutely loaded at cornerback. Dallas Golden, who I love, one of my favorite players, probably my favorite player in the class last year. They also had Mark Zachary, Mr. Football in Indiana. Cree Thomas, too, is a really interesting player, even though he's not ranked quite as high as Golden or Zachary. So you've got Leonard Moore for the next 2 years. You've got Christian Gray potentially for two more years. And then you got Golden, Zachary, waiting in the wings. Like, this is a very, very talented room. Also, Carson Hobbs is young, too. So I think this might be the deepest position on the entire roster. So I've got it at 5th. But that being said, I still expect Notre Dame to land some big-time cornerbacks in the cycle because that is what Mike Mickens does. And even if they're not ranked in the top 100 on the recruiting sites, if Mike Mickens offers a corner, I am convinced that player is going to be a stud because he is that kind of track record. No one was really talking about Benjamin Morrison as a future NFL guy, certainly not a freshman All-American. Mike Mickens did. He pounded the table for Benjamin Morrison, Leonard Moore, Christian Gray. He found Sauce Gardner. Like, he is truly one of the best assistant coaches in all of college football. Steve Wiltfong, the On3 recruiting director, recently called Mike Mickens one of the top 10 best recruiters in the entire country. So I expect Notre Dame to land some really high-end prospects in this class at corner as well. Joey O'Brien, talked about him earlier. Don't care if he's safety or corner, just get him to sign. They're also looking at 4-star Jordan Thomas. He's a cornerback from Bergen Catholic, same high school as Steve Angeli. Notre Dame has recruited Bergen Catholic really well in recent years. Kari Adams is one of the best corners in the entire country. He's listed as the number 2 corner on the 24/7 Sports Composite, number 38 player overall. If they are somehow able to get Joey O'Brien and Kari Adams, they might have to build a statue for Mike Mickens or maybe just promote him to co-DC. Either way, one of those things is going to have to be necessary if they're able to get these guys because they're that good. I mentioned the current commitment in the class, 4-star Chasten Smith, number 23 cornerback in the class, but I do expect him to decommit. Maybe things change here. Maybe Mike Mickens is able to keep him in the fold because I do know Mickens does really like him, but it doesn't really matter if Chasten Smith stays on or decommits in terms of the class as a whole. Obviously, I would like him to stick around because I think he's a talented player, but that is just how much trust I have in Mike Mickens to just figure things out at the cornerback position and also the safety position as well because he's leading the recruiting there. And I think the reason it's number 5 is because they just have so much talent in that room and specifically young talent. Like Notre Dame might go out and they might get a nickel in the transfer portal every year, but that doesn't mean they're not recruiting the position extremely well. The reason they do that is because veterans are just more suited to play nickel. It's a very difficult position in terms of who you have to cover and also what you have to do in run support. So I do think Notre Dame is probably going to get out of that here in the near future. I mean, Tariq Bracy wasn't a transfer portal guy. He was really good at nickel, and it sounds like Dallas Golden might want to play that position in a few years once he develops a little bit more. But I really think when you look at corner, this is the deepest position group on the entire roster, arguably the most talented, and that's why it's number 5. So now we have officially completed the biggest needs on the offense, biggest needs on the defense. So in summary, here is the list of the biggest needs overall. So at number 1 on the entire team, I've got defensive tackle at number 1. Biggest need on defense, biggest need for the team. Number 2, defensive ends. They need edge rushers. Even though they've recruited defensive end better than some of these other positions I'm going to mention, you just need an elite pass rusher. And Notre Dame might have one in Bryce Young, but they need more. So they need to continue to stack elite talent at that position. I think they are in a better position to do so. And number 3, I've got wide receiver. We know how that position has fared in recent years. It's been disappointing. It's getting better. Looks like Jaden Greathouse could be a really true wide receiver 1, a homegrown wide receiver 1. If it's on him, maybe it's Malachi Fields, but they got him in the transfer portal. He's only going to be around one season. Jordan Faison has a bright future, but he's a former walk-on lacrosse player who is now their wide receiver 2, maybe 3 next year. So they need to get some more elite wide receivers in that room to improve the passing game that has been, average to above average for the past several seasons. At 4, I've got running back. They missed badly in last year's cycle. They did end up with Nolan James Jr., but now with the new running backs coach, Jaywan Sider, who one of the main things you hear about him is how aggressive he is on the recruiting trail. We need to see that for the blue and gold. He did a great job at Penn State recruiting guys. He's already making some serious headway now that he's with Notre Dame. But if Notre Dame can land 2 really elite running backs in this class, that'd be huge because they're going to lose Jeremiah Love after this year. They could lose Shadarian Price, and they're going to have to figure out a way to keep Aeneas Williams and Keidron Young happy for one more year while they have to wait and not get carries because Love and Price are going to get the bulk of them. Behind running back at number 5, I've got safety. I really think that they need to shore up some of that depth and just get some more proven guys in that room. 6, tight end. I really like what they got last year with Flanagan. I think once Cooper Flanagan comes back from his injury, he's going to be good. But the tight end room is admittedly taking a step back in recent years, and it was sort of gradual. They got burned a little bit with Mitchell Evans' injury, but they need to add some more like Michael Mayer level tight ends in that room. 7, linebacker. They've been in really good shape there. Offensive tackle, great shape as well. And then cornerback, deepest room, but I have it at 9 just because I'm confident that Mike Mickens, even though it's not the biggest need, it's always good to get more elite guys. I think he's going to do that. And then at 10 and 11, I've got interior offensive linemen because I think they're done with the 3 guys they already have committed in this class. And at quarterback, they're done with Noah Grubb. So they still got some work to do at corner. That's why I have it at 9, whereas at interior offensive line and quarterback, I think they're done. So what's the common theme here? You need defensive line and skill players. It's a similar story. That's where the gap has existed between Notre Dame and some of the elite teams who have won a national championship in recent years. Notre Dame was able to get to the national championship, and they're really, really close. I think they've closed the gap with the elite teams in college football. They were right there on the doorstep this season. But in order to get over that hump, what do they need? Elite defensive line play, guys who can replace the production of Howard Cross and Riley Mills, and they need better skill players on the outside. They have one of the best running back duos in all of college football. That's not going to last that long. They need to reload at that position, and they need to rebuild that wide receiver room into a strength consistently, not just like one-off years where they have one good guy or they're decent enough. They need elite wide receiver play to have a truly high-powered offense that's good enough to win a national championship. So there you go. Those are my biggest needs for Notre Dame's class of 2026. We're going to continue to follow recruiting on this show over the coming weeks and months because that is going to be such a big topic throughout the offseason. But that is going to do it for this episode. Thanks again for making this your first listen of the day. I'm going to be right back here tomorrow. Then on Friday of this week, I'm going to be doing another mailbag, so it is time to submit your questions. I'm going to be rotating between mailbags and top 5 Fridays this offseason to close out each week with a little fun. But this is a mailbag week, so submit your questions in the YouTube comments or on social media. The X account is @LockedOnIrish. Instagram is @LockedOnIrishPod. Also, please subscribe on YouTube or wherever you are listening to the podcast. If you're watching on YouTube, remember, like the video. Or if you're listening to the podcast, please rate the show 5 stars, leave a review, and I'll see you tomorrow.